Today's guest has represented Hall of Fame athletes, negotiated billions of dollars in contracts, inspired one of probably the most iconic sports movies ever made, and somehow has stories involving Marilyn Monroe and Ronald Reagan. Why do you think that they decided Jerry Maguire was the story that needed to be told?
I think it humanized sports agents and gave people a sense of the real caring that goes into those relationships. I still rarely walk through an airport or go out to dinner where someone doesn't run up to the table or run up to me and say, or ask me to say those four words that start with, I'm looking for a team to show me the money.
You have lived a Forrest Gump life. Like, so many cool stories, and somehow you just keep ending up in the middle of history.
And at one point Marilyn Monroe visited, and so I sat on her lap. So I learned everything I needed to learn about the art of negotiation and leverage from dealing with Governor Reagan. I thought Barack Obama was an inspirational figure. If you wait for they or them, you could wait forever. The they is you, son, you're the they.
Welcome to the Amanda Gunville Show. Today's guest has represented Hall of Fame athletes, negotiated billions of dollars in contracts, inspired one of probably the most iconic sports movies ever made, and somehow has stories involving Marilyn Monroe and Ronald Reagan. But most importantly, he's also been one of the most important people in my life. Leigh, you've been my mentor, you were my first boss, and most importantly, one of my closest friends for, believe it or not, almost 25 years. So I think this is really funny. Before we even get started, I have to ask you something. Do you know what the most common question I get when people find out that I started my career working for you?
What?
They always say, wait,
No.
does that mean you
Tell
were
me.
the real life Renee Zellweger? Which you and I will find funny because we both know I was in junior high when that movie came out. But, it does make me wonder when you think about your incredible life, and I can't wait to get into it on this show today. But of all the stories that Hollywood could have told about you and your entire history, why do you think that they decided Jerry Maguire was the story that needed to be told?
I think it humanized sports agents and gave people a sense of the real caring that goes into those relationships and cut the stereotype of greedy, sleazy, avaricious, money-hungry agents. And I think what kicked it over the top was that they had a love story in it so that you could identify with him professionally, but also got the arc of his relationship and with the young single mother and her son.
Yeah. Well, I know that you are a giant movie buff. I don't think there's a movie out that you haven't seen, even from animated to all the genres. So I just wonder, when Cameron Crowe approached you all those years ago, what was your first reaction?
So I knew Cameron as a rock critic who wrote for Rolling Stone. So I thought that was interesting. He was the progenitor of the grunge music scene in Seattle. Uh, and he had written a book and then written a screenplay for a movie that I thought was particularly hilarious. It was Fast Times at Ridgemont High. And if you've ever seen the movie, it's Sean Penn's most dramatic role. He plays the stoner Spicoli. So I thought he wants to follow me around and be a fly on the wall, picking up atmosphere surrounding a sports agent. So I started taking him places, and we went to the NFL draft in '93, which had Drew Bledsoe as our client, picked first overall. And he came up to the press conference we had with Bill Parcells. He came to the league meetings where I was showing off some free agents. He came to a series of games, my Super Bowl party, pro scouting day at USC, and I told him stories, Amanda, loads and loads of stories. And then he went off and wrote the script. So I was technical advisor. So my job was to vet the script to make sure the willing suspension of disbelief that holds you in a motion picture, that people knew that the dialogue was fairly realistic, that the look on the set was fairly realistic. And then he assigned me a young actor named Cuba Gooding Jr., and I had to take him down to the Super Bowl in Phoenix and made him pretend he was a wide receiver client of mine for the whole week. And he hung out with Desmond Howard and Amani Toomer. And I actually had to show the quarterback in the film, played by Jerry O'Connell, how to throw a spiral because he had gone to NYU and they don't have a football program there. So, you know, it's now been 30 years and I still rarely walk through an airport or go out to dinner where someone doesn't run up to the table or run up to me and say, or ask me to say those 4 words that start with "show me the."
Well, that's actually one of my favorite stories that you tell. So, can you tell us the story about how that line came to be?
So we're in Palm Desert at league meetings, which have all the owners and executives in football. And Tim McDonald was a complete free agent uh, because he had been involved in the lawsuit antitrust. And I was showing him around. So at one point, Cameron went upstairs in Tim's room and was interviewing him about what he was looking for in the process. And Lou Dobbs, who was on CNN there and had a show called Moneyline. So Moneyline is in the backdrop, and Cameron asked him, "What are you looking for in this experience? What do you think will fulfill you?" And Tim gestured towards the screen and said, "I'm looking for a team that will show me winning because I've never had that. I need a team that will show me a great supporting cast." And then either Cameron wrote or Tim said the line, "I'm looking for a team to show me the money."
Yes, I love that. Well, you mentioned, Cameron's movie is Fast Times at Ridgemont High because it is hysterical. What scene in Jerry Maguire makes you laugh the most?
Um, Probably the scenes involving Jonathan LePickney, who played the young boy and would come up with things like the human brain weighs X pounds, and came up with a series of pretty funny lines.
Yeah, and
But it's all iconic. It helped me help you. You had me at hello. Show me the money. There's so many different lines from that film that have entered into popular culture.
yeah. Well, and that little boy, I don't know, a lot of people don't know, but he is a doppelganger for your younger son, Matt, when he was a kiddo. They were so
Yes,
stinking cute.
yes, he did, and Cuba came to the game with me, and Cameron had been around my son Matt, and but again, I've been pretty careful over these years not to share exactly what stories I told to Cameron and what went into that role.
Yeah. Do you feel like after the movie came out that your clients treated you any differently?
Well, first of all, a number of them were in the film. So Drew Bledsoe and Kajana Carter and Tim McDonald and Troy Aikman, a whole series of players were in the film, so they got the fun of playing cameo parts. And uh, but yes, it elevated and kick-started a whole series of uh, advances in our business because people were so fascinated with everything.
Yeah. Well, before Hollywood, before the movie, let's go back to the beginning because a lot of, I mean, unless you're like me and have read every one of your books, you might not realize sort of the history of your life. And we always talk about it. You have lived a Forrest Gump life. Like so many cool stories and somehow I don't you just keep ending up in the middle of history. So, can you tell us the Marilyn Monroe story?
Sure. My grandfather, John, was a restaurateur who ran a series of restaurants, and he had a restaurant, the Pavilion Royal, during the 30s that had Franklin Roosevelt's campaign events, and he jump started the career of a number of different people. So he had a club called the Trocadero that had Spencer Tracy and Clark Gable and Katharine Hepburn and all a series of stars hung out there. In his later days, he became the manager of Hillcrest Country Club, and Los Angeles Country Club wouldn't allow blacks or Catholics or actors or Jews or Latinos. So Hillcrest became the big hangout. My grandfather played gin rummy every day with something called the Comedian's Table, which was Groucho Marx and Jack Benny and George Burns. And you have to be a little older, Amanda, to appreciate some of those, but they were some of the funniest people in the world. And I would sit on his lap, so like Groucho Marx and his granddaughter Melinda, and my grandfather and I cut a record to the tune of Annie, get your gun. Anything you could do, I could do better. I could do anything better than you. And at one point, Marilyn Monroe visited, and so I sat on her lap. Not that I had any idea at that point what that meant, but whether it was Bob Hope or Danny Kaye, George Burns and my grandfather took me to my first baseball game, and I just thought he was very, very funny. And then they did a show with Art Linkletter called Kids Say the Darndest Thing. People Are Funny. And it was a big hit nationally, and they happened to pick my elementary school to take 4 kids from. And I was one of those 4 kids. So this was a big national TV show where he interviewed us and elicited funny lines. And I had an autographed Elvis Presley guitar that Elvis gave me at one point, and the big show was Rin Tin Tin. I had a Rin Tin Tin picture with the dog, and at any rate, so everything was headed towards entertainment in my life, but my father split off from that and wanted to educate kids and make a positive difference in the world. So he raised me with these 2 core values, and my mom outside of spiritual. one, treasure relationships, especially family. And the second is try to make a meaningful impact in a positive way in the world and help people who can't help themselves and relieve pain. So um, I flirted with entertainment and being an actor, and I modeled at UCLA. But then Berkeley was beckoning, and it was the 60s, and it was long hair and tie dye and herbal substances and rock music and free love. So I headed up to Berkeley, and my life took a different direction.
Yeah, a big event, I would say. I mean, the next story I want you to tell is the fact that you debated Ronald Reagan before he became president. Tell us
Well,
that story.
I was student body president
Mhm.
at Berkeley. The Vietnam War was going on, which was not popular among young people. And we would demonstrate against the draft and the war in Vietnam. And Governor Reagan was the head of the Board of Regents for Cal Berkeley. And he would crack down. So I learned everything I needed to learn about the art of negotiation and leverage from dealing with Governor Reagan. And we had a confrontation in front of the Board of Regents where he was trying to fire the chancellor at Berkeley because he had allowed classes to move off campus when Cambodia got bombed. And um, so he looks across the table at me and says, "Weren't you the same Mr. Steinberg who was arrested in 1960 sitting in front of troop trains in Oakland?" I said, "Well, Governor, I was about 10 years old in 1960, and I was much closer to playing with toy trains than troop trains, but that shows your usual adherence to veracity and fact." And that got it going. Now later, he gave me a humanitarian award and in the White House, and we laughed about those old days, but they weren't all that funny then. And so, at any rate, and that led me during law school to become a dorm counselor in an undergraduate dorm. And they moved the freshman football team into the dorm, and one of the students was the quarterback, Steve Bartkowski. And in 1975, he became the first player overall picked in the NFL draft by the Falcons. And there really wasn't a field of sports agentry then, Amanda. The teams had no obligation to talk to agents, and so you could call a team and say you're representing a player, and they just hang up the phone. But Bartkowski asked me to represent him, and there I was, brimming with legal experience, never having practiced before, and I had the first pick overall, and we got the largest rookie contract in NFL history, and that was 52 years ago.
Just a few short years ago. I mean, when you look back at all of these experiences that you had, especially in the earlier days, pre being an agent, did you feel like you were witnessing history up close? Like, could you feel that?
It just kept happening that somehow circumstances led to sort of being at the edge of whatever was happening. And it kept happening during the career too. So in 1975, we signed Steve Bartkowski with the Atlanta Falcons. And then guess who's running for president in 1976 from Atlanta? Jimmy Carter. So we get to know him. And later on, President Obama, and a whole variety of interactions with interesting people that were unlikely, but uh, I don't even usually talk about most of the things we've just explored because I'm not sure people would necessarily believe me.
That's a good point. What like speaking of all of these people that you have come in contact, I mean, when we worked together, there were so many people I got to speak to on the phone because of you. But I'm so curious because I feel like all of them have been interesting across politics, entertainment, sports. But of everyone famous that you've met, who surprised you the most?
Hmm. Um, a whole series of politicians who I helped, whether it was George Moscone when he was mayor of New York, who later was assassinated. It was a whole Barack Obama was real force. I don't want to get into politics, but for good. I love the senator from California, Barbara Boxer, who I thought epitomized courage in politics. Um, Ronald Reagan was a much nicer person in person than some of his policies were.
Hmm.
Um, and but I, what I looked for was, did these people have a larger vision of the world? Did they have a sense of compassion?
Yeah.
And then, as I've told you, my father used to say, if you're looking for someone to make a change or fix a problem, as small as picking something up off the floor that's trash, or as large as combating climate change or racism, the tendency is to wait for the they or them, to the amorphous they or them, older people, political figures, someone else will solve this problem. And he would look at me and say, if you wait for they or them, you could wait forever. The they is you, son, you're the they. So it imbues you with a sense of having an obligation to keep trying to develop programs and do things that make a positive difference in the world.
Yeah. Well, I witnessed so many of those programs. And I mean, I feel like just, I was around when your dad was still alive and he was such an incredible human. And so I know if I ask you this question, the answer would be your dad. But if you couldn't choose your dad and I asked you who was the most fascinating person that you got to collaborate with, who would you choose?
Um, Gee, there's so many. I had a relationship with Jesse Jackson, who in his early years was a firebrand, but then developed into a superior community leader. Um, um, I thought Barack Obama was an inspirational figure who was perfect for athletes because he was black, he was young, he was athletic, um, and he talked about hope. And so people like that, people I didn't meet who inspired me were like Martin Luther King, the pastor who led the civil rights movement and was nonviolent in how he achieved his goals, or Mahatma Gandhi, who led the Indian Revolution. And but they were people who had a worldwide vision of how to improve the quality of life for people.
Mm-mm. I mean, wouldn't we all love to have met those people? That would just be life changing. What lesson, because you did, I mean, and have spent time with some of the most incredible humans. What's one of the biggest lessons that you learned from being around such influential people at such a young age?
listening skills. I think the most important thing in life is to create an atmosphere of trust around another human being so that you can peel back the layers of the onion and understand not what their surface responses are, but what their deepest anxieties and fears are and their greatest hopes and dreams. If you can put yourself in another person's heart and mind and see the world the way it appears to them, then you can navigate your way through life gracefully. People always think it's suasion and your ability to talk and be a salesperson, but so much of it is getting to a deeper bonded level with the people around you. And I'm talking about friends, people in relationships, talking about clients, talking about people that represent athletic teams. But in all of it, can you dig deeper and find a commonality so that you're really in touch with someone's desires? So, Amanda, if you took values like short-term economic gain, long-term economic security, spiritual values, family, geographical location, um, making a difference in the world, profile, and then for an athlete, being a starter, being on a winning team, the quality of coaching, and the rest of it. If you can get someone to do an internal inventory and actually identify what their major motivation is in life, then you can work out solutions and help them fulfill their dreams.
Yeah. You know, I feel like just that approach made athletes trust you so much more. But one of the things that I noticed in this career for for 2 decades, you're 5 decades, but I was two, is that sometimes it's hard to get athletes to really open up and to trust you. Like, one, why do you think they trusted you, and how did you get them to get beyond like a one short sentence answer when you would ask some of those deep probing questions?
So you it won't come as a surprise to you that most men don't share their deep emotional feelings as easy as some women do. And so it's a tougher draw because these are people in sports who have been acculturated since Little League and Pop Warner to believe that, real men don't show pain, real men play and function in all circumstances, real men are stoic. And so you have to cut at those restrictions. And a lot of it is just spending time with people in an easy way. It's not a sell, but I mean, I would go with an athlete when they got a haircut or went out and shopped for music or um, come to their hometown and make sure to meet their high school coach and their high school principal and their pastor and the other people in their lives that are important. So it's having a holistic picture. And then I searched for athletes that had social conscience, that understood that the elevation of their profile could mean that they could trigger imitative behavior and being an influence. So that's where having them go back to the high school community, set up a scholarship fund or work with a Boys and Girls Club or a church, having them go back to the university community and bond with the alums, having them find some cause in their life they'd like to tackle and set up a charitable foundation with the leading business figures, political figures, and community leaders on that advisory board to help them execute program. So that's work done putting the 220th single mother and family into the first home they'll ever own by making the down payment. Or Patrick Mahomes' 15 in the Mahomies, where he helps kids at risk and the kids that are hungry and kids in hospitals. So, and it's messaging, it's teaching Lennox, it's having Lennox Lewis, the heavyweight boxing champion, cut a public service announcement that says real men don't hit women. And that could do more to trigger behavioral change in rebellious adolescents on the issue of domestic violence than 1,000 authority figures ever could. So it's trying to stimulate that part of an athlete, prepare them for second career. So one of the first questions I would ask is, what other skills or talents do you have besides athletic ones? What do you think you'd like to pursue in second career? Is it being an executive in sport or a coach? Is it media? Is it being a business leader? And trying to focus them from the beginning on that. And that's another way into understanding what their real aspirations are.
Yeah. You know, there's been so many programs, first of all, that I mean, there's been billions of dollars that have been put to good use, been raised, been just put into the world that have been inspired by you. One of the things you mentioned when we first started this question, you said it's no surprise that men don't express their feelings as readily as women do. And that was one of the things that I actually really loved about your new book, was that in it you talk about the power of vulnerability and how, you know, a lot of times people think that being vulnerable means that you're weak, but it's actually the opposite. So my question is, did you learn that over time? Like, were you able to be vulnerable from an early age based on your upbringing? Or is that kind of almost like a skill that you have developed throughout your life and career?
Even growing up, we talked about being open and honest. And the truth of the matter is, you can live on the surface and with surface interactions, or you can go deeper and bond with people at a deep emotional level. But for example, when I struggled with alcohol, then the question became, what in that experience could I use to help other people? And what lifetime would I be waiting for to be vulnerable and share experiences with people in a way that I might be able to help someone who's still struggling? And so the point is, what values can we push that make people happier? How can we create a society where people don't view each other as enemies but allies? How do we move? How do we fight against sex trafficking and domestic violence and bullying and racism and climate change? How, and so sometimes sharing your own experiences will stimulate other people to talk about their experiences. So as I've crisscrossed the country on book tour for the comeback, I've been able to elicit from some of the people that come to the signings or come to the speeches a commonality. Because, Amanda, life will invariably set people back. They'll be rolling along and all of a sudden some situation will occur that challenges the whole structure of their life. It could be financial, it could be marital or relationships, it could be health, or it could be addiction. But the question is not whether challenging situations will occur in life, it's how do you respond to them? How do you come out of adversity to be able to recapture your life spirit? Can you see the light at the end of the tunnel? Can you be resilient? So that was really the thrust behind this latest book.
Yeah. Well, and that resonates with me so deeply, as you know, because that's what I always say is that, I was diagnosed with breast cancer 3.5 years ago. And of course, everyone talks about the other side, right? Like, who do you become on the other side? But then there's also that question of what is this here to teach me? And my challenge, of course, was cancer, but other people's, as so poignantly pointed out, that it could be relationship, it could be financial. And so, how can you take those challenging situations in your life and who are they teaching you to become? Is it possible? Is it possible that this could be the best thing that ever happened to you because of the person that you become through it? And that's the thread that I really got. And being a first person witness to your life over the past 25 years and seeing, I mean, you've always been an incredible human, but just even seeing you grow from there is amazing. And so I applaud you for being so vulnerable to share your story in such a raw way. So
And I applaud you, Amanda, first of all, for the strength and optimism and hope that took you through the horrific, debilitating experience of having to be cured from cancer. And then the fact that you wrote a book that shares the experience and resonates with people who've gone through similar circumstances. So you exemplify exactly the spirit of being the they or the them that makes change in the world. So I'm proud of you.
thank you. I was inspired by the one and only. Well, this is a fun. Okay, let's play a quick fun game. Wasn't planned, but this would be fun because we've been talking about your life, my life, but really your history. So, if you could wave a magic wand and choose the actor and the director to create your truly Forrest Gump life movie, who would it be?
Probably Martin Scorsese, or at his height, Francis Ford Coppola, because they've created a number of movies that I greatly admire. And but Steven Spielberg, not to be too grandiose here, but those would probably be the directors.
And who would be the real Leigh Steinberg?
Who would play me?
Yeah. Who would be your wish?
Oh,
Who would be on your wish list?
I don't know. I've thought about it. It depends what age uh, that we're talking about, but I thought about somebody like Jake Gyllenhaal or um, someone with some energy and hopefully dynamic and
Yeah.
um, that captures the spirit that you can be successful in business while retaining your ethics and values, and you don't have to do what everybody else you don't have to accept situations in life, like
Yeah.
uh, we have concussions in football that wear down the brain and lead to bad consequences. What can we do to make that better? What can
Yeah.
we do? So hopefully it's just inspiration that we all can make a difference in the world in our own way. Good parenting is a really positive contribution to the world. So people can find their own path in their own way, but if you have massive amounts of people trying to make the world more positive, it has an impact.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to throw out who I think would be amazing because I feel like, if Travis Kelsey can throw out names on a podcast and then end up marrying the girl, we could do the same. So I was thinking about this morning and I was like, who's made some really like dynamic films that show an evolution of a character because you have lived this dynamic life. And I thought, Bradley Cooper could actually do a really beautiful job as being a director, I think. I think he could also potentially play you because he could evolve, and thank God for makeup. They could take you from, 15 to 77. But I know, and I'm not sure how you feel about this either, but I feel like the breadth of his capability and kind of character portrayal with Timothy Chalamet could be interesting as well. Just because of how dynamic he is. I mean, he's a crazy man in some of these movies. Not that you're crazy, but you are dynamic. So, just throwing it out there. I'm gonna sprinkle a little inspiration into the world. Okay, so quick question. Thinking about, because I have been with you on this journey and we've had several different iterations of the business. We had the crazy 100 client roster, half of the, starting quarterbacks in the NFL were our clients. People used to always ask us all the time, who's your favorite team? And I'd say, well, who's on offense, who's on defense, because it's wherever our players were. And then, we've gone into these periods of time that was all about impact and all about, making the world a better place. And all throughout that, you have been successful. And no matter what you have tackled, my question is, what do you think was and has been the hardest part about building businesses?
The build out necessitated creating a profile for the type of athlete who'd be receptive to an approach that's holistic and talks about retracing your roots, making a difference in the world, what you're going to do in second career, finding self-starters, finding people who are resilient in adversity. So the first year I did this, I had Bartkowski and I just did the biggest contract ever. But the second year I talked to a huge group of players with, middling results. And I realized I'm going to have to figure out what kind of family, what kind of values a young man, what sort of vision, and simply talk to those profile potential clients and only talk to those who I think fit that profile. And that led to 64 first round draft picks and the very first pick in the first round 8 years and 12 players in the Hall of Fame and about 30 baseball players who were first rounders. So it was that. Then the second phase was after I was in rehab and fighting alcoholism, how do you come back? Okay. So I had to prepare myself for the fact that someone would say, how can you guarantee that you'll stay sober? And that's not a guarantee, Amanda, that you can make. Just that you're taking the necessary steps to sustain sobriety. And then, you've been out of this business for a while. You still have contacts. You didn't do a great job of managing your own money. How are you going to manage ours? Well, we don't manage money. But I had to prepare myself for the fact I didn't have a divine right to represent athletes. They had needs they were coming to, so I had to be prepared for every tough question from a parent or a player, to be able to come back and not be defensive about the experiences that it had, and be transparent and open about what I had just been through. And that enabled me to to reestablish, find funders and reestablish a business, and end up representing again top quarterbacks and some of the top players.
Yeah. I feel like those lessons could actually apply across industry, because what I heard you say was pick a niche, right? Pick a niche and focus in on it. Don't do a shotgun approach of trying to get every athlete. Don't try to, appeal to every customer in the world, but really see where your passion aligns and really focus in on that. And I think that that can apply across industries. Then understanding what kind of objections you're going to get, whether it was from investors or from potential clients, and really understanding those and being prepared to respond to them, and then just owning it. Own your story, own your history, and be open, honest, transparent about it. And I feel like those three things really could apply to any industry. So I think those are phenomenal, just business lessons, not just athlete representation or sports business lessons. So I want to switch gears just a little bit, because back in 2018, it was the 52nd Super Bowl. It was Minnesota, and I think this was my third time working with you over the course of 20 years. But we were headed into the Super Bowl, and we were going to be throwing, I don't know, almost your 30th Super Bowl party, and we had a huge rookie class. Patrick Mahomes had just had his rookie season, and I just really wanted to do something special. And so I ended up working with a designer, and we created these, I don't know, they were 6 or 7 foot banners. I think there was 10 of them. Each one of them would display some period of history in your career. So we had the first rounders on one, we had the first pick in the draft, we had the Hall of Famers, we had, each decade. I wanted to put them all on one banner, but we couldn't, because every decade had like 100 clients. And so I created all these, got them printed out on these huge banners, and then Leigh walks in. I was like, you have to come in early. You have to be there before everyone else. But you walked in, and I, took you by the arm and just showed you your life's work as it revolves around being an agent. How did that feel to visually see your career as an agent in one giant, like, Hall of Fame display?
It was different because I didn't never thought in those terms. So it was sort of a revelation, because I've always stayed in this moment and in this experience, and I never thought about the cumulative effect of many years of work. So it was a little bit staggering. And again, I never really had much time to reflect in all those 52 years on anything other than what was current business. And so it was a bit of a revelation, and which, I thank you for. And because again, part of the way I've been able to navigate life is to put all my energy into this moment. so that right now I have no idea where my cell phone is. I don't know what time the next appointment is. I'm just listening to the sound of your voice and reacting to this interaction. And I never really stepped back and said, gee, you actually got a few things done.
Well, I can attest to that because back in the day, I think I had four cell phones and two Blackberries, and they four, or I think three of them were yours and two of them were mine. So I know you don't know where your cell phone is, but let's just do a couple fun things as we do look back. What like what draft day do you remember the most in all of your draft days?
Um, I mean, every time we had someone pick first was pretty incredible. Troy Aikman back in 1989 had been picked before the draft, so it was really and agreed to a contract before the draft, so it wasn't much of a surprise. But draft day is my favorite day of the year. It's a player surrounded by everybody significant in their life, their cousins and aunts and uncles and teammates and high school coach and the rest of it. And the tension ratchets up, and draft time's not real time, it's like water torture time. And every second seems like a minute, every waiting for the results, every minute seems like an hour. Drip, drip, drip. And the tension ratchets up, and then it explodes as the player's picked in one euphoric moment, which is incredible. Um, I mean, the year Patrick Mahomes got picked and by the Kansas City Chiefs was a real high because, again, he had everybody in his life all in the same room. And I've often been less concerned with how high a player goes in the short term in the draft as opposed to what organization is he with that gives him a better chance at a productive career. And so you knew that he was going to the Chiefs and Andy Reid, and that was euphoric. I mean, oddly enough, Paxton Lynch, who got drafted by the Denver Broncos, that was my first big first round quarterback, in the later phase of the career. So that was rewarding. And he had his at a bowling alley. And when John Elway called from Denver, he was out bowling. And so I had to pull him off the lane.
I love that. That's so good. So, if you could think about all of the rooms that you've been in where, the family's there, the support for the last, I get at that point, 22 years of the kid's life, whose family and the actual like vibe in the room was the most emotional on draft day?
Oh, I think Russell Maryland's father, Jim Maryland, was like a force of nature, and he had planned everything out. So that was a wonderful thing. The Tonga Vailoa family had this large extended family, and they all were involved. It Steve Young's father was a dynamic force. Um, so you see where the athlete gets it from because you see what the parents are like,
Yeah.
and they give the athlete enough space to be successful, but they're always a positive force.
Hmm. Can you think of a time where like something super crazy happened right before a player was drafted to where you're like, you're not going to believe that this just happened?
Um, I was fortunate in that we had done so much preparatory work so that um, we, the player was not going to get arrested he was not going to have a drug driving. There are not going to be unresolved issues that spring up at the last moment, because we've you know, covered all that. But the fact that no team put a draft pick down for Warren Moon, who ends up after 6 years in Canada playing 17 in the NFL and becomes the first African American player in the modern era to be selected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And all they had to do in 1978 was put a draft pick down in the last round, and then they would have the rights to him when he came back from Canada. They didn't do that, so that set up 12 teams competing from 3 different leagues. So that was a surprise.
Maybe that's why he was so kind to me, because I mean, the way that I got to be an intern initially for you was that I was a stage manager for Fox Sports and ESPN, and Warren Moon was the color commentator. And I spent, 5 hours as his stage manager, and after the game, he handed me his Steinberg and Moon business card and said, if there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. Which, for a girl from Montana who had no connections, had no idea about really the world outside of our tiny little town and my now college, that was a huge just kindness that was bestowed upon me. And so that makes me think that that was probably part of what shaped his willingness to see someone like me who wouldn't have otherwise had a chance in this big wild world of professional sports and say, hey, she worked really hard during this game, maybe I could help her just get an internship. And that's funny. I had never really thought of that as his background, and that maybe that's why he's been such a steward of really helping the younger generation throughout, his entire really life.
Right, and his Crescent Moon Foundation sends dozens of kids to college on his scholarships.
Yeah. So I have an answer to this question, but I'm curious if ours would be the same. Who do you think was the most misunderstood athlete that you ever represented?
Jeff George, the quarterback who was picked number 1 overall in the 1990 draft, and wanted to go home to Indianapolis where he grew up, but sometimes you can't go home. It ends up, and I thought that people, saw him as selfish and the rest of that. That's not a side I saw of him. And he kept bouncing around and he kept playing really well at one team after another, and they kept letting him go. And he had the best pro scouting day workout of anyone I've ever seen. He threw the ball so beautifully. And he matured over time, but people just reacted to some of the couple mistakes he made, in terms of things he said early in his life.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like, well, I mean, one, that's not my answer only just because it was before my time, but back then there was no social media to where you could, really represent yourself. It was really whatever the media portrayed you to be. And so my answer to this was when we had Run Ricky Run. So Ricky Williams, right before the season decides to leave, which, he was star running back, Miami Dolphins, and then the story breaks. And I felt like the media was portraying him to be irresponsible, selfish, leaving his team in a lurch. And what you and I saw, and he would oftentimes call your cell phone when I had it, so I would talk to him all the time, what I saw was just a kind-hearted, sweet, sweet human who wouldn't hurt a fly, wanted to just, be a good person and just needed a breather and needed, to have some time. So I felt like he was misunderstood, the way in which the media portrayed him, but in reality, all the time that I got to spend with him, and then when he came back and came into the office, he was just a sweetheart of a human being.
So there were two Ricky Williams. There was the hard-nosed player who chose football, running back, very perfect work habits, except for when he quit. But perfect work habits, great teammate, tough, traditional player. And then there was away from football where he was a searcher for higher truth and fulfillment, and that's where the drug and substance abuse program, which now you think about marijuana and the fact that you can drive within a block of here and find a marijuana dispensary that's legal. But instead of treating him, they just punished him. And I always thought the minute he gets to talk out what his underlying problems are, that you'd have more of a reintegration of those two sides. But that was a unique experience when Jay Leno said that the Ricky Williams tried to get Smarty Jones, the horse, to retire so they could smoke dope together. You got an understanding of how that issue had elevated.
Yeah, it definitely did. Our phones were ringing about every minute from various reporters who were trying to make their careers out of getting the scoop on what was going on. So, um, speaking of athletes, obviously you've been this incredible leader throughout your entire, really, life, from student government all the way through as the CEO and built all these businesses. But if you had to name one athlete that taught you the most about being a good leader, who would you say?
It was Warren Moon. I mean, clearly, because we were together for so long, and there used to be times where I'd ask him for advice. I just treated him like he was another lawyer or agent in our practice, and he had such great insights and common sense about life that that he was probably responsible for 30 clients that he had referred, and he was much more than a client. He was almost like a partner in helping build things out.
I agree with that. What about resilience? That's something that you talk a lot about in the comeback in your book. Which athlete, and obviously you have an enormous amount of resilience, but again, which athlete do you think embodies that the most?
Oh my goodness, that's a critical quality in an athlete being successful. So Steve Young and Troy Aikman and Warren Moon and the defensive lineman Bruce Smith and Derek Thomas of the Chiefs, and they all had the ability to experience adversity and come back. And I tell the stories in the comeback of Mahomes and Moon and Aikman and Steve Young and a variety of the players, and describe how they responded to adversity.
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Well, along those lines of leadership resilience, you being the incredible boss that you were, one thing that I've always admired about you is that, like, everyone knows about your athletes, the contracts, the movies, and all of that. But the thing that changed my life was your willingness to mentor people. So my first role, I mean, I wore many different hats over 2 decades with Leigh, but my very first role after being an intern was to be Leigh's executive assistant, which basically meant that I was supposed to be there before he arrived and I was supposed to stay until he left. And at the end of every day, Leigh had an exercise room down the hall. So he'd go on his exercycle, his exercise bike, and ride the bike for an hour, probably read 2 novels because you're a speed reader. But you would come out of that room and I would be finishing up work, and you would always, every single evening, call me into your office and you would sit me down and we would go through the day, and you would say, this was what this meeting was about. This is our goals here. This is why I made the move when I did it, did this. And hey, this is what we're hoping to achieve. And as a 22-year-old who was just learning, I always like to say I got my PhD in sports business from you because you were willing to take that time at the end of the day to really and truly mentor me. Why do you think that mentoring people and taking that extra time with little old me mattered to you so much?
Well, first of all, selfishly, it allowed our business to grow and thrive because to the extent that you really understood every issue and understood the considerations, then I knew you would use your own good problem solving skills to be able to have more insight into everything that could happen, and your role could expand. And I've always thought that people are jealous of the success of others, but I want everyone around me, and I wanted you to be a superstar so that the world, and have the world perceive you as a superstar. And again, from a humanistic standpoint, it's a teaching counseling function. From a pragmatic business standpoint, it's having the best educated, best problem solvers, and to give you a methodology to look at things through instead of just having you be on the surface, so that you would be able to use your own bright mind to solve things. I think part of the problem is if you hover over people and you make them nervous and worried about what they're going to do, how they're going to be judged, you don't get the best from people. So the point is, I always saw you through the prism. Yes, you might be 22, but then you had this talent set. You were a hard worker, you listened to people, and you were able to take projects and actually enhance them, which maybe wasn't a traditional role, but it was the role I wanted you to play.
Yeah. Well, I've always said that, thank you, by the way, but I've always said that one of your superpowers is that you attract the most incredible humans. And when we worked together, I guess this is probably 8 years ago, we had a documentary that was, filming your life. And one of the things that we talked about titling it was The Tree of Leigh, because there are all of these humans that have spent time with you, that started their career or maybe early in their career, started with you, and have all gone on to do these incredibly significant things in their career. And I think it's important to note that, yes, really smart humans who are ambitious are attracted to you and this profession. And in order to get through that door, they had to be exceptional. But I also think that they would not have gone on to be as impressive of a person or have as impressive of a career had you not also mentored them through that process and made them, step up their game to their full potential. So I think there's another movie in there.
Um,
um,
I think if you express the right energy, um, uh, which is inviting, but I always think you need a passion for something, and we were making the lives of athletes better, and we were making the society better, not to be grandiose, but and people who respond to that are going to be a certain type.
let's finish this off because we've been having a lot of fun together talking about so many fun past stories and everything that we've done. So let's do a little rapid fire. So this is just one word or one sentence answers. So, Leigh, the best negotiator you ever met.
I know this is supposed to be rapid, but there's a wide swath of people to to pick from. The best negotiator, Robert Kraft,
Most underrated athlete you ever worked with.
Jeff George,
Most impressive person you've ever met.
President Obama,
Your favorite Super Bowl.
Steve Young throwing 6 touchdown passes in Miami and getting the monkey of Joe Montana off his back.
Love it. Okay, this one is important because I've seen you read a million books. The most important book you've ever read.
Sapiens by Noah Duvall Harari, which is a history of the human species and how we evolved and what's natural to us, and just amazing insight.
Wonderful. Okay, last question. I mean, you've spent your life helping really everyone achieve their dreams. And I mean, like I said, you've created careers, you've changed lives, you've mentored hundreds, if not thousands of people. So when people talk about Leigh Steinberg 100 years from now, what do you hope they say?
He cared. He used his power to make it a better world.
Love it. Well, Leigh, you've been a mentor, a friend, and one of the people who truly has helped shape my life. So, thank you so much for being my first guest, and thank you for everything that you've taught me. I truly love you.
Well, I love you too, and you were worth it all.